To understand why a unanimous Supreme Court decision matters so much, you first have to understand how rare it really is in today's America. We live in a time when the court is often portrayed as sharply divided, where 5-4 rulings dominate headlines, and every decision is instantly framed as a win for one side and a loss for the other. So when all 9 justices line up behind the same outcome, it immediately raises a different question: what was so compelling, so undeniable that no one dissented? This isn't about politics alone. It's about precedent, legal structure, and how power flows through the system. The Supreme Court sits at the very top of the judicial pyramid. Its job isn't to decide what feels fair in a given moment, but to interpret the Constitution, federal law, and how lower courts have applied them. When a case reaches this level, it usually means there is confusion, conflict, or inconsistency across the country. Different states may be applying the law differently. Federal agencies may be pushing the limits of their authority. Businesses, workers, or local governments may be operating under unclear rules. A Supreme Court ruling doesn't just end a lawsuit. It standardizes reality. A 9-0 decision is the strongest form of standardization the court can deliver. It tells every lower court, from federal appeals courts to state judges, that there is no ambiguity left. This is the rule. Follow it. For regulators and lawmakers, it's a warning and a guide at the same time. If you're acting outside these boundaries, you're exposed. If you stay within them, you're on solid ground. Historically, some of the most impactful Supreme Court decisions have been unanimous. Brown v. Board of Education was 9-0, ending legal segregation in public schools and reshaping American society for generations. United States v. Nixon was 8-0 with one recusal, forcing a sitting president to comply with a subpoena and reinforcing that no one is above the law. These cases didn't just resolve legal disputes, they redefined national norms. While not every unanimous decision carries that level of social transformation, the mechanism is the same. Clarity at the top forces alignment everywhere else. Today's unanimous decision follows that tradition of clarity. Whatever the specific legal question was, the court clearly believed the answer was rooted firmly in existing law and constitutional structure. That usually means the justices saw either overreach that needed to be checked or a right that needed to be reaffirmed. In many cases, unanimous decisions arise when the court believes the lower courts or government agencies drifted away from the plain meaning of the law, or when conflicting interpretations created instability that had to be resolved. From a practical standpoint, the immediate impact is often felt quietly before it's felt loudly. Lawyers adjust their advice. Corporations revise compliance strategies. State and local governments update policies. Financial markets, which pay close attention to regulatory risk and legal certainty, begin to price in the new reality. Even if the average person doesn't read the full opinion, the effects ripple outward in ways that eventually touch daily life, from how businesses operate to how individual rights are protected or limited. It's also important to understand what unanimity does psychologically. When the court splits 5-4, half the country tends to question the legitimacy of the outcome. When it's 9-0, that skepticism loses traction. It becomes much harder to argue that the decision was purely ideological or politically motivated. That doesn't mean everyone will like the result, but it does mean the legal foundation is harder to attack. In an era of declining trust in institutions, unanimity carries extra weight. Another key factor is how future cases will treat this ruling. Unanimous decisions often become strong precedent. Lower courts are less likely to carve out exceptions or reinterpret the ruling narrowly. Attorneys are more cautious about challenging it. That means the decision's influence can extend far beyond the original facts of the case, shaping related legal disputes for years or even decades. This is where the nationwide implications begin to take shape. Depending on the subject matter, a unanimous ruling can affect employment law, regulatory authority, property rights, free speech, healthcare, technology, or financial markets. If the decision limits the power of a federal agency, that could slow or reverse regulations across multiple industries. If it strengthens individual rights, it could trigger new lawsuits and force policy changes at the state level. If it clarifies how a law should be interpreted, it could unlock or shut down entire categories of legal claims. Think of the legal system like a complex machine with thousands of moving parts. Most of the time, it hums along with minor adjustments. A unanimous Supreme Court decision is like resetting a central gear. Everything connected to it shifts slightly, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. The full impact often isn't visible on day one. It unfolds as cases are dismissed, settled, or newly filed in response to the clarified rule. There's also a political dimension that can't be ignored. Lawmakers pay attention to unanimous rulings because they signal where the constitutional boundaries truly lie. A divided decision might invite legislative workarounds or renewed challenges. A unanimous one sends a strong signal. Push further in this direction and you will lose again. That can reshape legislative agendas. influence how bills are written, and even affect election talking points. For the public, the most important takeaway is not just what the court decided, but how decisively it decided it. In a polarized environment, unanimity is rare, and rarity makes it meaningful. It suggests that beneath the noise of political conflict, there are still core legal principles that command universal agreement at the highest level of the judiciary. That doesn't solve every problem, but it does anchor the system. As the details of today's decision continue to be analyzed, one thing is already clear. This ruling will not stay confined to law journals or courtrooms. It will shape behavior, policy, and expectations across the country. The question now isn't whether it matters, but how far its consequences will reach and how quickly institutions and individuals will adapt. Because once the Supreme Court speaks with a single voice, the real movement doesn't happen inside the courtroom anymore. It happens everywhere else. This is the phase where a unanimous decision stops being a legal document and starts becoming a living force that reshapes incentives, behavior, and power dynamics across the country. Courts don't have armies, regulators don't have unlimited authority, and lawmakers don't get automatic compliance. But a clear Supreme Court ruling changes the risk calculus overnight. Suddenly, actions that were once defensible become liability. Strategies that relied on ambiguity collapse, and policy built on shaky interpretations are forced into the open. The first place this impact shows up is in the lower courts. Thousands of cases across the country sit in various stages of litigation, many of them hinging on similar legal questions. When the Supreme Court delivers a 9-0 ruling, judges don't debate how seriously to take it. They apply it. Appeals that once had a chance are dismissed. Ongoing cases are settled or withdrawn. Plaintiffs rethink their arguments. Defendants reassess their exposure. This quiet but massive legal realignment can clear court dockets and redirect legal energy almost instantly. Next comes the regulatory response. And this is where the decision begins to affect everyday life more directly. Federal agencies often operate in gray areas, interpreting statutes in ways that expand their authority over time. Sometimes that expansion is intentional, sometimes it's gradual, but either way it depends heavily on courts allowing it. A unanimous Supreme Court decision that draws a clear boundary forces agencies to pull back or risk having their rules struck down. Compliance departments across industries immediately start reviewing guidance, enforcement actions, and pending rules to see what still stands and what no longer does. This has real economic consequences. Regulatory clarity reduces uncertainty, and markets love certainty. Stocks tied to heavily regulated industries can move sharply after a Supreme Court ruling, not because the decision directly mentions them, but because it changes the rules of engagement. If a unanimous decision limits agency discretion, businesses may feel more confident investing, expanding, or hiring. If it reinforces regulatory authority, companies may shift strategies, increase compliance spending, or exit certain activities altogether. Either way, money moves in response. State governments also feel the pressure. When federal law is clarified at the highest level, states that were pushing the boundaries often have to adjust quickly. Laws passed under uncertain interpretations may need to be rewritten or repealed. Enforcement practices may change. State courts align their rulings accordingly. This is how a single decision becomes truly nationwide. Not through headlines, but through thousands of coordinated adjustments that happen quietly over weeks and months. There's also an important signaling effect that affects future policymaking. Lawmakers watch unanimous Supreme Court decisions closely because they reveal where constitutional and statutory lines are firmly drawn. If Congress or state legislatures were considering bills that relied on the rejected interpretation, those proposals often die behind the scenes. Conversely, if the court affirmed a particular reading of the law, it can embolden lawmakers to act within that framework. The decision doesn't just settle the past, it influences what laws get written next for individuals. The impact can be subtle at first, but meaningful over time. Depending on the subject of the case, rights may become more clearly protected or more clearly limited. Employers may change workplace policies. Financial institutions may revise lending or reporting practices. Technology companies may alter how they collect data or moderate content. Even if people never read the opinion, they live with its effects through changed rules, contracts, and expectations. One of the most powerful aspects of a 9-0 ruling is how it reshapes litigation strategy going forward. Lawyers are less likely to bring borderline cases when the Supreme Court has spoken so clearly. That reduces legal uncertainty and discourages forum shopping, where plaintiffs seek out favorable jurisdictions. It also shifts leverage. Parties that once relied on prolonged litigation to force settlements may lose that advantage while others gain clarity and confidence in defending their positions. The media and public debate evolve as well. A divided decision fuels ongoing controversy and reinterpretation. A unanimous one closes doors. Arguments don't disappear, but they lose institutional backing. Over time, public discourse adjusts, and what once seemed contested becomes accepted legal ground. This doesn't happen overnight, but it happens reliably. It's also worth noting that unanimity doesn't mean simplicity. Many unanimous decisions include concurring opinions where justices agree on the outcome but differ on reasoning. Those differences matter for future cases as they hint at how far the ruling might extend or where limits may exist. Legal scholars and attorneys study these nuances closely because today's unanimous decision often becomes tomorrow's foundation for more contentious battles. From a historical perspective, periods following strong Supreme Court clarity often see bursts of legal and economic adjustment. The system recalibrates. Some industries adapt quickly and thrive. Others struggle or consolidate. New legal theories emerge, built on the clarified framework. Old ones fade. This is how law shapes society not through dramatic announcements, but through structured, enforceable consistency. What makes today's decision especially significant is the environment in which it arrived. Polarization, institutional skepticism, and rapid social and technological change have put stress on legal systems worldwide. In that context, a unanimous ruling carries extra stabilizing force. It reassures markets, signals boundaries, and reminds institutions that there are still shared legal principles strong enough to command full agreement. But this stability doesn't mean stasis. Clear rules often accelerate change by removing hesitation. Once people know where the lines are, they move faster within them. That's why the period after a unanimous Supreme Court decision can be surprisingly dynamic. The uncertainty phase ends and the adaptation phase begins. So as analysts, policymakers, businesses, and citizens digest what the court decided, the real question shifts again. Not just what does this mean right now, but how will it reshape behavior, power, and priorities in the years ahead? Because that's where the lasting impact lies, an understanding that requires looking beyond immediate reaction to the deeper structural shifts already underway because